Everyone has some sort of a closet that's become too small. A closet is no place to live, and I want to support as many people as I can in stepping out of that prison into the fullness of life that's waiting for them on the other side of that closet door. I'm Nancy Shadlock from Centered Life Coaching. Join me in listening to these Coming Out Chronicles. Get curious about your story, and then see what good things are waiting for you on the other side of your closet door.
Are you ready for a wild ride? Today's podcast is all over the map, and I wouldn't expect it to be anything other than that with today's guest. I met BE through a group that I'm part of called CEO, which is an incredible group of women entrepreneurs, business owners that are changing the world and working on the UN's to-do list of creating safe water and resources and safe spaces for people. And it's been incredible to meet these women identifying people that are changing the world. And I was really astounded when I did a initial chat with B and was so inspired in so many ways. And so I knew that I had to have B back on the show so that you could all hear some of these different ways of thinking about life. And I hope that you really enjoy today's episode. BE Alink. What a name. I can't believe that. This is so beautiful. I'm so happy to have you on the show, B.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. I have no idea where it's going to go or what you're going to share with us, but I know it'll be inspirational.
That's kind of how my whole life is. I never know where I'm going. I just go with the flow and follow the energy.
Follow the energy. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, this is called the Coming Out Chronicles, and usually people share some kind of coming out story. So tell us what you would like to share.
Well, you started with my name, BE Alink, which is literally in my passport, I'm Barbara Elizabeth Alink. But Barbara Elizabeth Babs, that's never none of that ever resonated with me, and I didn't really know how to call myself because everything was annoying. And then especially when people started calling me Barbara again, it's like, Barbara, like, come on, that's not me. And then my current partner, she started calling me a few years ago, she started calling me B, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. It's also my initials, so it's completely B. That's why it's two capitals. And then that just felt right for the first time in my life.
Great.
And then other coming out, I don't know what that is actually, because I always say, like, I grew up without language. Whatever I felt inside, there were no words for. I wasn't a boy, typically. I wasn't typically a girl. I mean, I'm female identifying, but I never fitted any of those binary things. And then when I learned about lesbians in high school, I was like, oh, maybe that. And I was like, yeah, I do fall in love with women, but it always felt uncomfortable. That's not really me too. I always felt a stranger, like a stranger between the lesbians too. And then there was dykes and butches. I was like, oh, we're getting closer, but no, not yet. And then my brother had a relationship with a woman who had transitioned into her female body. And she, in that time, we called that transsexual. And she was always teasing me. She said, if there's anybody transsexual, that's you. You gotta like. I was like, no, this is fine actually, and that's not it either. So I don't know. I never really had language for what I felt, but then I learned that because I didn't have language, I also wasn't conditioned in any of those things because it didn't apply to me anyway. So I kind of went to, when I started looking back at it, it's like, oh, actually, I never conformed with anything. And I never got conditioned in any kind of way. So there was a lot of freedom in a funky way of growing up without language. Does nothing apply to me anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I always, feeling an outsider always puts me in a position of being able to look at, like have the perspective and witness, not from within, but witness what's going on. Yeah, I don't know. I always have a bit of a different look on things. Being the outsider, being the weirdo, being the gender weirdo, as I call myself. Yeah.
Before we press record, I checked in about your pronouns, and do you want to share what you said about that?
Yeah, I've always been a little bit uncomfortable about the pronouns, clearly. It's like he, she, like I actually don't care. Like I get so often spoken to as a sir, as a as a he and or a he or a she, and I'm like, whatever they identify with, it's all true. But if people ask what my pronouns are, it's just be. He, she, be.
It's very similar.
It sounds the same, right?
Yeah. The thing that I find interesting about you, that I've heard you speak at other times about, is coming out of this idea of healthcare into recognizing it's sick care, actually. And so can you tell me, like, what was your process of coming out of, and maybe it was never a coming out because you were never fully like buying into what people called healthcare, but share with me that coming out.
I think it comes from the same perspective that I always question language that's being used, because language is very manipulative if you don't understand why which words are used. And if you look at the healthcare system, everybody's trying to improve it, and I don't think it's a healthcare system. So why do we need to improve it? And to break that down a little bit, like if you, as long as we say it's a healthcare system, we live with the perception that we can actually change that, because we need to make our healthcare system better, because clearly it doesn't work for people. But if you look at it, like it's reactive and it only kicks in once you're sick. To me, that's a sick care system. And we need that. And it might be, we might need to have it a little bit less focused on medicating only, or preventative sick care being, of preventative healthcare procedures being more business than that it's preventive healthcare, like all sorts of just annual checkups. I think is a big business. So we need sick care, but once you call it sick care, it gives you space to look at the other side, to look around, to turn around and say like, if that is sick care, then we can now acknowledge that we actually don't have health care. Then what does health look like for us, by us? Instead of us being a body with a problem. We're not a body with a problem that can be treated. We're human beings that have certain things. And like there's social determinants of health that in the sick care system we never talk about. Why not? Because I think that what you put in your mouth has a huge effect on what kind of sicknesses we might have. Like the whole industry of diabetes is quite obscene, actually. And that is there because nobody really focuses on the food. I mean, they do focus on the food. I think the food industry feeds the pharma industry. It's a business. Let's put it that way. It's just a business. So, and if you see it, that the motivation is to make money. I've never understood how healthcare can be privatized. Never understood that. Like our health, how can you privatize that? Because the moment you privatize it, you know it's about making money as the first priority. And then people and people's health and wellness becomes at least the second priority. How can that ever be the way to go? That's just
not health care.
not healthy.
It's not caring for
right?
health. It's caring about the bottom line.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And so when you acknowledge that that is the motivation, you also know that you don't have a healthcare system. And so now turn around, instead of focusing on the problem, I always make jokes like, if you focus on the problem, all you see is a problem. Why would you want to do that?
Right.
Like, why not turn around and it's like, oh, that's all empty there. Now we can play. It's an open play field. Let's have fun. Let's be like, what do you like? How would you like to be treated when you're 80 and ready to go to an elderly home or something? How would you want that to be? Because that's us. We're not designing this stuff for the disability, the disabled people, or the sick people, or the elderly. Martin Luther King always said, like, by giving something a title, a name, we can other them, because now they are the slaves, the elderly, the disabled. Now we can dehumanize them and treat them as something else.
Us and them.
Us and them, exactly. And I think the whole thing of giving names to segments in society has a purpose of segmenting our society so we feel powerless. So we're all separated from each other in minorities. See how that feels? We're in a minority. That doesn't feel very powerful. So for me, I always turn it upside down. It's like, for me, we live in a world with a vast majority of diverse people that just want to be happy. And then we've got one minority, and generally they look like white, wealthy guys. And they cause the problem.
But then we're othering them.
Yes, we're othering them. And it is also feeling the power change. Because if we're thinking about ourselves and it's not to put white guys on the spot, and the system at the moment only serves, heteronormative, patriarchal, capitalistic white guys, generally. That's just, in reality, when you look at the Bezoses and all that sort of people, then that's pretty much what it does. That's an industry, though. That's the whole economic model. So if we feel that it's to feel the power shift in ourselves. Again, the language has power. If I feel that I'm part of a small minority and I have to fight for my rights, and everybody steps on me and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, no, we're all people that just want to be happy. And if you feel that, then you can mobilize and build something for us, by us. And if we can mobilize, we can, for example, say, you know what? We can become aware that, for example, the whole meat industry is not very healthy, and how we do that. And how we do the meat industry right now, that there's quite an apparent correlation with the forest fires in the Amazon, for example. And once you're able to see that and become aware of that and are willing to have that have consequences, you can say, let's mobilize. And for half a year, with everybody that we know, we just stop eating meat. That nobody dies from stopping eating meat for half a year. Let's see what happens. And in the meantime, we're going to pay the farmers in the Amazon $1 more per day to plant trees instead of burning the forest to graze their cows. Everything changes, and it's simple. We have overcomplicated things to a point that it's really difficult to see the forest through the trees, so to speak. But it's not that complicated.
And we've abdicated our power to the rich guys and thought, like, well, they're the only ones who can change things. But you're saying, like, if we just gather a group of our friends and all the people in the world that want a happy, healthy life, that's a big change.
I think we abdicated the power to scarcity mindset. And living in fear and trying to eradicate any kind of risk of that. Anything that can happen to me is now, we have to mitigate the risk. We have insurance companies, we have security systems, We have war to protect us. It's all bullshit, and it all makes money. So I think the whole scarcity mindset, what's the problem? We have been trained to focus on the problem and try and fix it. And as long as you focus on the problem, you're stuck because you don't have enough money, you don't have enough time, you know, like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming, all those problems at the moment in the world. And it's only to continue to make us feel small. And I think the change comes, like when people talk about systems change or change in the world, that's also a BS. The world doesn't need to be changed. The world is fine. We're killing ourselves, so that's a bit of a problem. If you are attached to humanity surviving, I'm not too attached to either or. And if you look at civilizations, they kill themselves ultimately. So that's just what we're doing. But then at least have a party and not be in the drama of, oh my God, the Earth is gonna, you know, disappear. All the forest fires, all this, all that, the oceans. It's all drama. And I ultimately think that because the systems are traumatizing for people, if we just chase money and status, we constantly get traumatized by everything that we do in this society, by every supermarket you go into, we get traumatized because it doesn't actually resonate with us. And what do traumatized people do? They search for drama, because that's what you do when you're traumatized. You can't be happy because, oh my God, what happens if I'm happy? You know.
And the drama is familiar.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. Like you perpetuate the drama, the elevated adrenaline that gives you. And so as long as we all live in the drama of all the complexity of the problems that we created, we perpetuate the systems that create those dramas, because we are the system. We are part of that system as long as we participate in the dramas as traumatized people. We perpetuate the systems that destroy us. That's just to me, that's really clear. And so for me, it's the challenge is the willingness to be aware, no attachments, and the willingness to have my awareness have consequences. Because people don't want to change generally. So if you tell people that they need to change, they're going to dig in.
Unless they
right?
choose it.
So
I'm exhibit number 1 right here.
Yeah. So what I made my life to do is to create something else, literally turn around from the drama, create something else that might become really attractive. And when people are attracted to something, they might find an alternative to then change their ways, to let go of the attachments to the old. And then when looking back, they might say like, oh, I changed. I didn't think I could. But by being attracted to something new, something else, something old that was remembered, whatever you're attracted to, then, you know, that's like a magnet. So I create magnets.
Tell us about this magnet that you created. One of the ones.
The Alinker magnet.
I'm sure that you're like a bit of a mad scientist, always dreaming up another magnet somewhere. So that will be for the later question of what's your next coming out story. But tell us about the Alinker.
Well, the Alinker itself, it started, it's a 3-wheeled walking bike for people that don't know it. It's a 3-wheeled walking bike with 2 wheels in the front, one small rear wheel. It's an overarching frame with a seating assembly on top of it. So you sit as you walk. So you actually walk on wheels, but you're fully supported and you're upright and you can walk.
And your feet touch the ground, like you're propelling yourself by your feet moving on the ground. Is that right?
Yeah, but you're pretty much at eye level because you're upright. You're just sitting down a little bit. So you might be, you know, a few inches lower than eye level, but pretty much eye level, which is a desired level in this society where people under the eye level are often dismissed. That is not a problem with people in wheelchairs, but that's a problem of the able-bodied people that are uncomfortable looking down and addressing somebody in a wheelchair. And we really need to talk about that because it's so ridiculous. There's tons of people that really need wheelchairs to move around. And it is completely crazy that we start talking louder because they might not understand what we're saying. That happens literally. It is really crazy. Yeah. I challenged myself in the beginning when I started with the Alinker. I was like, I mean, I've had a few things in my life, but I've never used a wheelchair. I was like, I'm going to be in a wheelchair for a bit and just see what that experience is. My grandma always taught me you have to borrow the shoes of somebody. Find somebody in a day, every day, find somebody that feels uncomfortable and then borrow their shoes and then see what the world looks like from their shoes. So I got a wheelchair and I started going around and see what that experience was. Challenging, very, very challenging. Well, people treat you like you lost your mind, not just your mobility.
Wow.
It's people literally, they slow down their speech and they start talking louder, like really.
Wow.
And or they completely ignore you. They talk over your head, or they say, oh, "What happened to you?" Or like, "Oh, can I help you?" And like they're like completely not just person to person responses. Yeah, I mean the personal questions that people dare to ask you, and me as a gender weirdo, same thing. I dare to be different, so now people have the right to ask you all sorts of very inappropriate questions. Like, why would I ask somebody in a wheelchair who's missing her legs, for example, like, oh, what happened to you? I don't even know you yet. That's a personal question. That's really crazy. Like, that's you have no right to ask that kind of personal questions. Like, it would be like to reverse a few of those things. Like I would ask a heterosexual couple that I just meet, like, what do you do in bed with each other? How do you do it?
Yeah.
And that just shows how ridiculous that is. But I got that question now less that I'm older, but when I was younger, all the time. It's like, how do you do it to women? It's like, fuck off. Sorry, but there's really get out of my bed. That like I'm not in your bed either. Go away. How dare you? Really?
Yeah. But we get asked all the time how we had our kids, which like in some ways we like sharing it because we want people to expand their ideas of how you could have children, but also you're right, like people aren't walking up to heterosexual couples, how did you get your kids?
No, did you do it in vitro? Was it natural?
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. But so yes, you like to share how you got your kids, but it's weird and awkward that you get those questions before people even know you.
Yeah, without relationship. Totally.
Exactly. It's inappropriate. It's totally inappropriate. And people who dare to be different, whether you're a gender weirdo or use a wheelchair or walk funky or, have whatever skin color, people ask you questions that are not right before you have a relationship. So those are universal experiences in a society where something is considered mainstream and anything that is not mainstream gets treated differently. And being treated differently, whether it's on gender or skin color or whatever, I think is a quite universal feeling. It has different history parts. Like Black people have a completely different history, where they come from and where they were treated wrong. But the fact that people can ask you questions that are not appropriate, I think the feeling of being othered is a very similar feeling between people that are not fitting in the mainstream kind of thing. And so with the Alinker, back to the Alinker, sorry, I always get distracted. With the Alinker, when my mom said, over my dead body, will I ever use one of those things? And she pointed at some wheelchairs and electric scooters and rollators and stuff. it wasn't about over my dead body, but you don't think about things before somebody launches them into your viewfinder. That comment of my mom launched the issue in my viewfinder, that that medical devices are designed as technical solutions for a body with a problem. They emphasize the disability and thereby create a social divide between people without disabilities. Why would you do that? I actually think that there's a psychological reason why that is that way, because we don't like to be confronted with our own mortality. And clearly, a disability is the first dent in our own mortality. Invincibility, we don't want that. That's uncomfortable. We don't want to think about that. We want to mitigate all the risks. Nothing. We don't want to have anything to do with the risk or the fact that, I could have a disability one day. I probably will unless I drop dead immediately, I will have a disability, starting with glasses. That's the first little sign of like you're 50 plus somewhere. You need reading glasses, otherwise you're blind. So that's a disability. We made that cool because we make cool glasses now, but it is the first, little dent in my invincibility. Is like, oops, I actually need reading glasses.
Let me insert here for those who can't see you. B has glasses that are a circle, and then the other lens is a square. And so once again, just like, let me think differently about this.
Yeah. And yeah, so I did not design the Alinker then as the next thing for a body with a problem. We are not a body with a problem. We're whole human beings who want to live an active and engaged life. So I designed the Alinker for how we want to live. And then I came out to what this was. But the premise was like, it had to be so cool that people would love to use it. And it had to be so cool that, and it's not to make disabilities invisible at all, but it's to take the first association, like, oh, what happened to her or happened to him? Make that like, wow, what's that cool bike?
Right.
And then the user can say, well, I'll give you a clue. I can't walk, I have MS. But they're already talking. And it just bridged that first discomfort. And again, it's not to make disabilities invisible. There's a ton of disabilities that are invisible, and with the Alinker become communicable. Like a lot of obvious disabilities become a little bit less pronounced, because it's like, wow, what's that cool bike? And people that have invisible disabilities, like chronic pain, like MS, often is quite invisible. Like, people in parking spots have always problems like, you don't look disabled. It's like, the fuck are you doing? Like, who are you to tell me that I don't look disabled? What is that anyway? What does disability look like in your mind? So by designing it to be so cool, it actually fucks with all the assumptions about disability. And that's exactly what I wanted, because people need to be shaken up a little bit. Like, think what they say, think what their assumptions are, and be a little bit stirred up. There's nothing wrong with that.
So you created a magnet that people would want to use, and then people would want to talk about, connect with.
Yeah, it's also bright yellow for the people
you created a link.
But then in the whole process, Nancy, of testing it with Alinker users, and over the years, we have learned that isolation is a way bigger problem than all the physical stuff that people are dealing with. Because in our society, again, mainstream versus all the people that are clearly not mainstream, again, whatever that is, we dismiss people because we other them. We put them in segments, we make them feel small, and then we dismiss them, and they're at home desperately Googling for something that makes them feel better. And so with the whole approach to building the company of the Alinker, we have built our whole company to create access to mobility, to create access to community. So we've got, for example, an integrated crowdfunding platform. We were the first in the world to do that, to allow people to have their individual crowdfunding campaign to get an Alinker, which is built on the awareness. Our sick care system drives people into poverty. The moment you have a diagnosis of MS, you often lose your job, but you also lose partners and friends because, oops, that was too uncomfortable. I never signed up for this. Not all of them, and luckily we have a few, like a whole bunch of really, really amazing couples in our Alinker family. But I also heard devastating stories from many people that lost their partners because they couldn't deal with it. And so people end up losing a lot of their support network, jobs, money, income, and the medical bills increase. So you're pretty literally driven into poverty. If you have savings, that's in the US, you have to eat up your own house before you get any disability. So you're literally stripped of everything that you built through your life before you get disability pay or whatever. And that just seems completely not right.
Mm-hmm.
And then people sit alone at home and they're isolated. They're often depressed. There's a study done that, or a research done that 80% of people with disabilities are on antidepressants. Suicide is huge. Like all those things, and if you treat those as problems to be fixed, you never get to the bottom of it.
Right.
Because it's not about just exactly. It's never like in the UK. They now have a ministry for what is it, for loneliness. Loneliness is not the problem. It's the symptom of a system that only measures in making money.
Only
so once we're
the
at
problems.
the risk, exactly. So as long as we see them as the problems, we're stuck with trying to fix them, and nothing changes. So the same as racism. Racism is seen as a problem. We need to eradicate racism. Yes, we do, of course. And it's not the problem. It's there for a reason, and it's there by design to keep us divided so that white folk don't know what the mass incarceration problem is. So they continue to buy shit that's made for nearly nothing in jail, which is the next slave labor. But people don't know that because racism has a very strong effect.
Can you explain that further?
Well, the white supremacy system created racism to keep us divided. In that system, there's mass incarceration, like disappropriate amounts of Black people are in jail for nothing just because they can't buy themselves out for crimes that you think that's in jail anyway. And then they do labor for $26 per hour. And if you just Google which corporations use incarcerated people to have nearly free labor.
Wow.
And we buy this stuff in shops all the time. So by buying stuff from those companies, you have slaves in prison working for you.
Wow.
And racism keeps us separated, keeps us ignorant about luckily we have people like Ava DuVernay who makes movies about this and educates people. But you know, it serves the purpose that white people stay ignorant and continue to buy this stuff made by free slave labor
that we don't even need, that just clutters our lives and keeps us further divided.
But so that's why I say racism is not a problem. It's very problematic, obviously, but it's not a problem to fix. The system created racism because it has a purpose that benefits the system. So as long as we fight the problems that are not problems, we perpetuate those systems.
So what would turning around look like in that situation?
Just be aware of which companies are using prisons to create to make their products, and stop buying their products. It's an industry. It's a complete and utter industry, and that's just one example. It's like the food industry feeds the pharma industry. It's an industry. The war industry. I've lived years in Afghanistan and in other countries after war. It's an industry. For every dollar that we give in development countries, whatever that is, $1.3 comes back minimum. We make money over developing work. Of course, otherwise we wouldn't do it, because a capitalistic system really doesn't give a crap about poor people. A capitalistic system needs poor people to maintain its wealth. We need poverty. Yes, we need poverty, and we need to other people to continue to justify that we fabricate stuff, manufacture stuff in the countries where they treat people like shit. And we justify that because we have the right for cheap products.
Well, B, this is getting heavy. Thanks a lot.
And that on a Friday afternoon is like, oh, well. Well, there's just so much stuff in there that you can riff on this forever, but it's the essence is be willing to be aware of the language that we're using, and then be willing to have those awarenesses have consequences for your behavior. And turn them around. Question the language that we're using. Question it all the time.
Yeah. Well, and like, I feel like what you said earlier was don't just focus on the problem and create more drama around it.
Yeah.
Find the magnet, create the magnets that are outside of that offer a new way. Play
and have fun. And there's not new ways. I think there's a lot of ways that deeply resonate with us that we've forgotten, like from a few hundred years ago. Ultimately, I think we're all indigenous people that have just gone a little bit lost, so to speak. But in my body, I understand. I deeply resonate with values that I have in my body. I know those things. And yet everything out there with the systems that we're having is not resonating with who I actually am. So we have to remember who we are, that we just want to be happy people together, and that we are not what we have, but that we are who we choose to be. And if I choose to be a kind person and in everything show up as a kind person, I'm willing to come out as a kind person, because that's hard.
Tell me more.
Well, it's hard to be kind. It's not nice. Nice is different. But again, the language, they're always used intertwined, niceness and kindness. But kindness is really hard, because sometimes really hard things can be the kindest thing to do, because you need to bring up something. I need to be able to go to bed at night and think like, I like you. I want to go to bed with you. And if I'm not kind and I've done things or left things because it was too uncomfortable and I chose my own discomfort over really showing up for somebody, that wasn't kind, because I chose my own comfort.
Right.
And so kindness is sometimes hard. It's very hard. And it is what I choose to do, because I believe in kindness is the way forward to be able to find a community of other kind people and then play and imagine and dream again.
Something that you said to me in a conversation we had a few weeks ago was like how much your life has changed when you found a community of people that is like there for you and wanting to help you succeed. And it stuck with me, because that's one of my big tapes that fires in my head so often, is that like, if you tell people what you really want, they'll not help you. They'll do everything they can to make it not happen. And it's just like, what? Like, that isn't true. But yet there's ways that I can see it happen. And so then I want to like focus on those problems of that see, that happens. But to have like share this story of how that didn't happen for you. You shared what you needed and you got help.
That is a very intentional community that is completely built on intention of radical generosity. That's the CEO network, founded by Vicky Saunders. And it started somewhere like women entrepreneurs, women-owned, women-led companies get 2% of VC money, venture capitalist money. We're not a minority. Hello.
50% of the population.
Right? 51 actually. And we create startups at a rate 1.5 times higher than men at the moment.
Really?
So we're definitely, we're definitely not a minority. But you know, 2%. I got like 2% of venture capital money. No, screw venture capitalists because I really don't want that money. Well, to give you an example, what it means to be a female entrepreneur in a technical field, creating a bike-like thing, not once, but a few times, investors, like people that I was pitching to, whatever, and I don't do that anymore, but because it's so boring. They asked me, shouldn't you hire a real engineer to help you with this? Just last week, I was asked by a woman who knows things about supply chains, and she said, like, shouldn't you hire a specialist to approach this problem? I was like, I just explained to you how we did this all and how we survived and how we're actually doing really well. Shouldn't you hire an expert? Probably a guy. That was the idea. But it's a woman asking me, because women are no much better than men, because we're all conditioned in a certain same system. We are conditioned to put ourselves down and to take a back seat and to like, oh, well, you know, let him talk. Like, we're all conditioned that way. Me less, because I'm not such a woman. So I could see that. It's like, oh, that's the dynamic. Interesting. You. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Where were we?
When people came and helped you.
Oh, yeah. So the intention of CEO was Vicky, but then I became part of that. We created with hundreds, now thousands of women, a network where people give $1,100 into the network, they activate, they become an activator. And that goes into a pool and then becomes a perpetual fund. The fund is loaned out to me, for example. I was one of the CEO ventures selected by the CEO activators. Also, it's a completely open and democratic process. And then we got a 0% loan, and in 20 equal terms, I pay that back. So after 5 years of each year, a cohort of ventures, that becomes a perpetual fund. And it's currently on the trajectory to exceed $1 billion, to be $1 billion fund by 2025 or something, 26, that funds 10,000 female-led, female-owned companies each year. That's big. That's quite big. There's nothing else out there in the world that actually works. Like many of those funds, they are there to, we've got $200 million for women entrepreneurs, and they don't even know the women entrepreneurs, or they don't know how to allocate the money because they don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of problems there, and there's a lot of money that flows to things that never arrives to women-owned, women-led companies. So this fund is based on, I mean, that's just the start, but what happens if I'm selected as a startup, as a venture, that was in the second year cohort of CEO? it's literally from asking a few white guys in a boardroom and then hearing for an investment, and they telling you like, oh, we need you to bootstrap a little bit harder because the risk is a little bit too high for us. That flips to, in CEO, we have selected you. We love what you're doing. We want you to be successful. What do you need? We live so much in a winner takes all concept, like the one Tesla, the one Amazon. All those things are just the winner takes all. And they have monopolies and it's crushing everything else. What if we're all winners? Like I dare to say that that little baby that is always identified in Tibet, that apparently has a special mark on it to become the Dalai Lama. I bet you that any baby can become a Dalai Lama if given that much love and education and nurturing throughout the baby's life growing up. Anybody would become a Dalai Lama. So it's not about a special sign that the baby had. It is about the circumstances that we gave to that baby to grow up in. And so if you create the circumstances of radical generosity, like, what do you need? We're here. We've got your back. We selected you. We love what you're doing. We believe in you. If you have that surrounding you, we have no bankruptcy during the whole COVID time. We had nobody go under because we stood up for each other and we helped each other. I paid different payrolls of other companies because we could. And that kept my CEO sisters alive. And there was a lot of generosity in the whole network, activators that jumped in that had more money. Like, we kept each other alive. Nobody went under. Actually, we created jobs during COVID throughout all the then 68 ventures. Now there's 107 because we just went through the summit. But we do extremely well because we're in a community of radical generosity. If I need something, I ask. And now I dare to ask because it's safe. People don't dare to ask for help because it's not safe. There's either strings attached, or there's repercussions, or there's power over. All not safe. So of course I'm not going to ask for money. But in CEO, it's like power with. Being in relationship with each other makes us both better. I create a purpose, I create a business, I have the nutrients as the activator, for example, and together we are more whole. And that heals. I think we have a lot to heal. The capitalistic world in overdrive is damaging us, it's traumatizing us. So money is traumatizing us and keeps us in scarcity. So what if money is just nutrients and let them flow to where they're needed? Because we're in relationship with each other and now we can trust each other. Everything changes. CEO has literally changed my life, if not saved my life. Because it's damn hard to set up a company like I've done, and many of the companies in CEO. And many of the companies in CEO, if they had been a guy doing them, they would have been long picked up by some venture capital because like, oh, that's cool. But because it's a woman-owned company.
Scrutiny.
Right? Well, men invest in what looks and talks like them. So a white guy is much likely to invest in another white guy than he is in a black woman, for example. Much less likely to invest in something that doesn't look like him.
Yeah.
2%.
I loved what you said about we have all the resources at our fingertips when we're in relationship with each other.
Yeah, we have everything available to us. CEO is now a network of 7,000 women and 107 ventures, $7 million in a perpetual fund. We have everything that we need. Between all the women in the network, there's hundreds of millions of dollars. There's inventors, there is generous people, there's like accountants, like we have everything, lawyers, everything. We have everything available. And you know, Vicky always does that. does this when she's in an audience. Who likes to help somebody? Everybody puts up their hands. People are generous because that's who we really deeply are.
Mhm.
People love to help.
Yeah.
But if it's not safe to ask for help, nobody's asking. So in fact, all the people that like to help are deprived from being able to help because nobody's asking, because
Mhm.
it's not safe.
Right. That gives me some clarity about my own tapes then. Like there's some legitimacy to the fear. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got a little taste test of that this week. I was on a call with the activators last week and got paired up with someone, and she shared some of the gifts that she brings and was like, I have this to offer. Would anyone like it? And I was like, yeah, I would love that for my business. And so we
Mm-hmm.
went on a call yesterday and she helped me look at some things differently in my business that I think will help with it. And then as she was talking, she was sharing kind of her next direction. And I was like, oh, I have this thing that I could offer you. And she's like, I would
Right?
love that. And so it's just beautiful how getting rid of those strings, like, yes, that looks very transactional, but she was willing first to just give without any string attached, which
Yeah.
was really beautiful.
Yeah. Doesn't that feel good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Be able to help people. And ultimately, I think always that, like, people like to say, like, I'd like to help. Ultimately, I think we like to be the person that we never had. So
Mhm.
ultimately, we want to help ourselves and heal
Right.
from being hurt when it wasn't safe.
That's my work in the world.
There you go.
Wish I had a coming out coach.
Well, we can have a call. We can have a follow-up call, see how I can do that. I've got some life experiences now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I love the ways that you think, not just outside of the box, but as you say, what box? Just like
Mm-hmm.
think differently, notice things that aren't in the mainstream, create magnets. I love that. Yeah, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Nancy. It's wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the Coming Out Chronicles. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. And if you think it would be helpful for someone else, please share it with them. If you'd like to connect with me, reach out on social. I'd love to support you on the next chapter of your coming out story. Until next time, this is Nancy Shadlock from Centered Life Coaching.